We have the privilege to be joined by Jason Anderson, Managing Member and Senior Consultant of Grad Metrics, and Teresa Stewart, 529 Business Development Consultant, who will both be offering information about financial aid and the Kansas Learning Quest 529 Education Savings Plan. Here's some quick background about our presenters. Jason Anderson is a seasoned college consultant focused on affordability, student success, and financial common sense. Jason holds an extensive professional background, including roles as a higher ed instructor, entrepreneur, and professional college and career planning consultant. He is a certified public accountant in the state of Kansas and holds 2 master's degrees in business and education. Teresa Stewart is the 529 Business Development Consultant at American Century Investments. They are the program manager for the Learning Quest 529 Education Savings Plan, which is administered by the Kansas State Treasurer's Office. Teresa will talk with you about what a 529 plan is and how you can use it to save for higher education for yourself, your children, or grandchildren. In fact, you can set up one for anyone you'd like to help save for their education. Teresa will tell you about the features and benefits of using a 529, including state and federal tax benefits, and will answer your questions. Feel free to participate in the discussion by using the chat to add your comments and questions. If you prefer to stay anonymous, you can send me or our presenters direct messages on Zoom. Jason and Teresa will address your questions following the recorded portion of this presentation. Thank you all again for joining us today. Here's Jason and Teresa.
Hey, well, thank you all. Welcome to this presentation. Let me give you a little bit of history. So this is actually going to be a 2-part presentation. And the reason is because Johnson County Library is always looking out for your best interest and looking at various financial topics that are of interest to you all. One of the things that came up was, how do we save for college? And when you think about that, and when I thought about it, when they approached me to say, we'd like you to present on this topic and also cover some 529 information, really my wheelhouse and my expertise is college planning. And so I have sat down with families. I've sat down with moms who are expecting children that are saying, hey, how do I start saving for my child that's not even born yet? And those are really exciting conversations. But really, my expertise is on the how to think about it, at least philosophically. But when it comes to 529s, I am a CPA, I am a CFP, but I'm not registered to do securities or anything like that. And so when Johnson County Library said, we'd like you to speak on this, I thought in the back of my mind, we need the experts to tell you all what that looks like. And the experts in Kansas are the Learning Quest plan. And so that plan in Kansas is administered by American Century Investments, as I'm sure Teresa will discuss with you all later on in the presentation. And she's going to tell you all about that stuff, which I'm really excited about. And I can guarantee you I'm going to learn stuff from that presentation, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to start this by talking kind of the philosophy. What do you need to know when it comes to college planning and saving for college and preparing for college? What's the money you can maybe expect? What's the cost you can expect? How do we think about saving for college? All that stuff we're going to cover in this first portion. Then we're going to cover Teresa's going to cover 529 plans in the second half. So we're excited to have you here. Let's go ahead and get going. So the agenda for today, you've maybe even seen me present at other presentations. I do all things college. And so college costs, we're going to talk about that. It may be surprising to you. Long gone are the days where we can work in the summer and pay for college the following 2 terms, and then work again in the summer and then pay for the 2 upcoming terms. Cost has ballooned exponentially. So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about student loans, a philosophy behind saving for college. We'll talk about what it means to select schools with a particular emphasis on affordability. And then we're going to talk about financial aid. So what can you expect? Now, granted, we're talking today. So if you have a child who is 2 or 4, kind of like I do at home, things may change by the time they get to college. But we'll talk about what that landscape looks like at the moment. Okay, a disclaimer too. So my full-time job is in higher education. I work for the University of Kansas. I teach on faculty in the School of Business. And so KU likes it when I say what hat I'm wearing and when I'm wearing it. So today I'm wearing my Grad Metrics hat, which is my college planning firm, not my KU hat. So just keep that in mind. I want to keep those two things separate. So college costs. Okay, here's a quiz for you. And by the way, I can use K-State now. I am a doctoral student in the personal financial planning program at K-State. So I am currently experiencing this hurt and pain because I'm paying tuition to K-State. But what do you think in today's dollars it cost for a first-time freshman going off to K-State, living on campus? What do you think it costs per year to go to school? And by the way, this is the totality of the costs. This is tuition, room and board, books, fees, transportation expenses, personal expenses. What do you think that number is today? Well, here you go. 1 year, $27,185 a year living on campus. This is before financial aid, okay? So you might get scholarships, you might get some loans or grants from the government, but this is what it's going to cost you. By the way, if we look at this over 4 years with a 5% increase, we're really looking at about $117,000 over 4 years. Ouch, right? This is a significant chunk of change. I find that when I'm planning with families, they are not prepared for this. And by the way, do not despair. We'll talk about many strategies, tips, and tricks as we go throughout this presentation, but this is the reality, and I want to start with the reality so you know what you're working with. Just a little bit about this, by the way, it's not your fault, okay? Honestly, college is expensive. It's really expensive, and it's been inflating at a faster clip than the economy itself. It's a service sector, so sometimes that happens by default, but the costs are out of control. Why is that the case? Okay, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but the reason why I think it's the case are these reasons outlined here. Administrator cost. So it used to be back in the day, I used to work in university housing early in my career. And way back, like let's talk early 1900s, a lot of times you would have a faculty member who would step into the classroom and teach. And the next thing you know, they're also running the residence hall on campus. Those days are over. You don't see faculty who are running residence halls anymore. So what we have now is we have faculty and we have staff members who also get paid. So we have a lot more administrative costs. We have fundraisers and VPs and presidents. They get paid lots of money. And so that's part of it. Well, at least a lot of the staff members do at the top levels. A lot of staff members don't get paid a lot, but we have administrative costs. We have constant construction. Geez, anytime you go by a big state institution or private institution, they're always building a new building. So that's expensive. There's service sector inflation. Again, that goes at higher clips than the goods economy. We have student loan debt, which I think is the next bubble. Honestly, we'll talk about student loan debt and some of those numbers here in a second. And then we have scholarships. And so there's one thing I want to tell you. We're going to talk about it here in just a little bit more, but it's called discounting. And that's an important piece. But discounting is essentially a lot of private schools giving money on the front end so that their school is affordable, even though they say it's $50,000 a year on their website. And that's expensive too. Private institutions have to discount, and that means they're bringing in less revenue. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that dynamic here in a second. So what is this? Is this a Ritz-Carlton? Nope. This is basically what college dorms look like nowadays. And so this is kind of where housing accommodations on campus and even off campus have gone. So we shouldn't be surprised when we look at a KU, K-State, and living on campus is upward of 16,000 a year. I don't know those numbers are exact, but that's probably right around it. So we've got a pretty big issue when it comes to paying for those accommodations. And you can't blame schools, right? They're sales bodies just like anybody else are selling a service, and they have to attract students. And so if you don't have amenities like that, they go down the street to the other institution. And so schools are just trying to remain competitive, but in that race to get students, you're the one that ends up paying that cost. Okay, so that's a little bit about what college costs today and what we have to look forward to. Let's talk student loans. So what do you think is the average student loan payment in today's dollars? So you get done with school, you go off, You start paying your student loans. Maybe some of you on this call are having this dynamic. What do you think you're going to pay per month on average? And by the way, some of these numbers are a little bit old, but they're probably within the last 2 years, so it's fairly accurate. Well, that monthly number, drum roll please, 393 a month. And by the way, if you're going to grad school, like you're going to law school, med school, all sorts of different stuff, this can balloon like $393 will look really good after you went to law school. Most of the time, it's not uncommon. I've worked in my own practice with people who have 200,000 in debt, 300,000, 350,000 in debt. I've worked with people in past lives that have had that much debt. So it can get out of control really, really quick. And let's take a look at the numbers here when it comes to student loans. Student loan debt, private and federal, 1.64 trillion. And actually, if we want to compare this to credit card debt, it's about $1 trillion, so significantly higher. Delinquency rates, high, 11%. This is why a lot of banks and credit unions don't even get in the space. Federal student loan borrowers, we get about 42 million. Average federal student loan debt, about 35,000. And again, if you go graduate school, it can be significantly higher. If we look at it from a state level, darker red colors are what we don't want to see. And so Kansas is a lighter blue color. We like to see that, but look at our neighboring state in Missouri. If you're here in the KC Metro, you're probably commuting into work in Missouri or what have you, significantly higher levels of debt in Missouri in particular. So that's concerning. So that's student loans. Now let's talk saving for college. All right, so my job here, again, is not to necessarily talk about 529s. You're gonna hear about that here in a second. But what I'm gonna talk about is how to think through this. Again, you saw that $117,000 number. You're probably starting to wonder how you're gonna afford that. Well, this is the way I would think about it. So the first thing you need to do is you need to define your goals and set a college funding strategy. So you need to have those conversations. Unfortunately, a lot of those conversations are had like as the child is going off to school, okay? That's the wrong time to have that. And I'll give you some questions on the next slide. The other thing that I want to tell you too is as you look at that 117,000, you probably shouldn't think, okay, I'm going to save all of that. You know, maybe that's somebody's goal if you have the income and the bandwidth to do that. But really, I would think of it more in terms of a third, a third, a third. And so let's think about a third of that coming out of debt and scholarships, which is about what the government's going to give you as financial aid is set up right now. Now it's going to be loans, but at least you could cover that piece. It might be grant money, but most people get loans. And so another third, let's think of paying that while our child is in school out of current earnings. And so another third is going to be hopefully savings in a 529 or whatever that looks like for you. And so that makes that 117,000 number a lot more manageable. So once you figure out what that number is, and by the way, there are many other things like going to a 2-year school or a 4-year school or what have you, then we can take that number that we think we're going to need and we can project those costs and we can figure out what is it of that piece of the pie, what are we actually thinking about saving for? And so there are lots of links. And by the way, I'll give you a copy of this slide deck, lots of links and calculators out there that we can figure out what is it going to cost for me in my situation that I've defined in the college funding strategy. Then we can actually regress that back to a monthly saving number. And then at that point, step 4, after you've gone through 1 through 3, is to define what the vehicle is. And maybe that vehicle is a 529 account, maybe it's something else. But that's the step 4 that really the second portion of this is about. And so what are some of those things you need to talk about when it comes to college funding strategy? The breakdown between debt, scholarships, and current earnings that you're going to pay. Limits on school choices. So are you going to tell your child, hey, you're going to go to this school, or you're only going to go to a state school, you're going to go to private school? What's the desired pathway? Do you want them to go to Johnson County Community College for 2 years and then transfer out? Save yourself on those housing costs, save on the credit hour costs. So anyway, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are some of the things to consider when you're developing that college funding strategy. Now, when it comes to selecting schools, one thing I want to tell you out of the gate is that college cost is a lot like a used car lot, okay? So just because a school, and particularly private schools, say that they charge X amount of dollars, like at a place like William Jewell, you're going to look on the website, or Rockhurst, it's going to say we charge $50,000 a year. Well, what I don't want you to do is say, I'm not going to go to that school. And why is that the case? Because we know statistically, by looking at the research, that private schools have to be competitive. So using our William Jewell example, William Jewell has to compete with UMKC down the street, and they're substantially less expensive. So most private schools will discount their tuition about 50% on average. And so that $50,000 sticker price is going to go down significantly to something that's more competitive. And so don't essentially write off private schools. You should have private schools in the mix for you because you may be surprised. That's actually my own story. I went to Rockhurst University and I didn't even know it existed. I ran into it on my way to go visit UMKC. So if you're going down 55th Street, you're going to run into Rockhurst before you get to UMKC. I get out of the car. I think it's UMKC. I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. I realize it's Rockhurst. I apply. They give me good scholarships and I go for about a state school price. So that's the outcome that I want for you instead of just throwing private schools out the door. You should also have schools in different categories and multiple schools so that when you get your financial aid offer at the end, you essentially have a good mix of options. So you want backfall schools that are affordable and a good fit for you. You want best fit schools that have the courses that you want. You visited campus and you like it. And you should also have aspirational schools that maybe you don't think you're going to get into or are a reach for you. So you should diversify your school list just like you diversify investments or your options or your opportunities. College is no different. Don't apply to only one school. Put several schools in the mix. And you have to define criteria. And I do know I'm taking a look at the time here. I have about 20 minutes, so I've got 3 minutes left. So always feel free to email me if you want to go more in depth. I actually have another workshop that goes more in depth in some of these topics, but I'm limited in time because this is a two-part presentation. So how do you create that school list? Well, lots of great resources out there to search for a school list. One of my favorite, College Scorecard. Also love College Navigator. So you can get a good understanding of what these schools are going to cost, but also start to think about, okay, well, what school might my son or daughter want to go to? How can I expose them to those campus environments? Because really defining where your kid wants to go, finding that best fit is going to save you money by getting them out in 4 years, by having them not transfer, by having them be successful. Those are also ways to save money. So financial aid, if we look at how families actually pay for university, this is how it falls out. And so if you look, 44% parent income and savings, that's what we're going to talk about in the second half of this presentation. But also parents typically borrow. There's lots that comes out in scholarships. Students borrow a decent amount, student income and savings. So again, when you think about what you're going to save, it's going to be in this whole context here. And I can tell you the title of this slide is private scholarships. Yes, you can go to some of these private scholarship searches, start to think about what your son or daughter is going to have to do to get those scholarships. But this is a very significantly less portion of the funding pie. Probably less than 5% come from private scholarships. And so not a lot of money there. You do need to plan to save in some of these other issues. By the way, the majority of money comes from the school itself and from loans. And so GPA, ACT, class rank, these are the three categories that your son or daughter is going to get scholarships based on when it comes to academics. There are also merit scholarships too, like sports and playing the tuba. But when we're looking at academic scholarships, we do need to have a good GPA, good class rank, good ACT. And some schools, high schools here in Johnson County don't even keep class rank. So you're already narrowed down to 2 of 3. So GPA and ACT, SAT are important factors. You also have the opportunity to apply for financial aid through the FAFSA. So I've got whole presentations on this. You can also estimate what aid you'll get. So as you're thinking about what do I need to save, you can go into FAFSA Forecaster right here. You can put in some information and it will say this is probably what you're going to qualify in terms of financial aid. You can factor that into the equation. And this is just stuff that you can get from the FAFSA. I'll move on from here, but it's going to be something you can reference when you pull down the slide deck. Financial aid letter, there's some information here on that. But the final thing I want to leave you with is there's 2 ways to make college affordable. One is to decrease cost. The other is to increase funding. And so when we increase funding, there are all sorts of opportunities to increase the funding that we're going to get to go to school. Some of these you've probably heard of, others you probably haven't. Like you probably don't know what a work college is. I have blog posts on that on my website at gradmetrics.com. Great opportunities to cut the college cost. One of the things that I would say if you're coming over from the Missouri side, A+, free Johnson or a free community college program. Johnson County Community College, very affordable. You cut out the housing costs too. One of the things that I do want to point out here as well, excuse me, let me take a drink. I'm going pretty quick here. But one of the things that I would tell you is employer tuition programs right now are amazing. Several large employers like Walmart, Target, Starbucks, UPS have amazing tuition-free programs where if you work for them, they will pay for you to go to school at places like Arizona State and get a great degree. And so look into employer tuition programs, especially now. If you're in a situation where like, I can't save anything, I can't afford for my kids to go to school, they can go to school through an employer tuition assistance program. It's an excellent opportunity. Lowering costs, you can look into 2-year, 4-year transfer. You can talk to your CPA about tax advantages. You can diversify a school list between public and private schools. Yeah, there are reciprocity programs like Missouri Student Exchange Program or the Midwest Student Exchange Program. You can dual credit things in high school and save a lot of money. There are also alumni discounts if you went to a school and your kid goes there as well. All sorts of different things. There's a whole list here. Again, you can refer to this at a later time. Another one that I would propose here for you as well are loan forgiveness programs. So if your kid wants to be a teacher, go into public service, medical professions, a lot of times there are great opportunities to get debt forgiven in those opportunities. So anyway, this is kind of what GradMetrics does, but I'm going to leave you with my contact information here. Always feel free to email me, call me. You can text that number that's listed. And then if you want the slides, I've actually posted my portion of the slides at gradmetrics.com. You can get it at gradmetrics.com/workshops. There are also PDFs of other workshops that I've done that might be of interest for you all. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa. How did I do? It looks like I'm 3 minutes over, but lots of information there. So.
No, you did just fine, Jason. Thank you. And I will just say that a lot of the things that Jason told you, I learned kind of the hard way on my own when I had a daughter who graduated from high school here in Johnson County in 2014. And really that senior year, we were scrambling, trying to figure a lot of this out. And if I had had a Jason or a GradMetrics to go to, it would have been very helpful because I will say that a lot of the high schools, they have so many students that these counselors really do not have time to go into any of this type of information with students. And so you're kind of on your own. And a lot of the things that Jason has given you are some fantastic tips. Things like, the ACT scores. We did not know that that was going to equal dollars in a lot of cases, a discount, as Jason mentioned. A lot of the schools will discount tuition based on the score of your student's ACT score or whatever. So I think you've got a very valuable resource there, and the FAFSA alone is something worth just taking a class all on its own and figuring it out. There are some legislation changes that might happen to make that more simple in the future. We'll see. But it can be very daunting to parents, especially the first time you go through it. And it's something you have to do every year that your student is in college. So it's not a one and done kind of thing right now. And a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about really dovetail right off of what Jason has talked about, the high price of college. And as he mentioned, really 529 is just one option as far as a way to save for college. And let me go ahead and share my screen with you now. And let me get that up here. And go over here. 529s, I don't know how many of you might be familiar with what 529 plans are, but as Jason mentioned, they are one way of saving. There's some great tax benefits to you for doing so. So I think they're definitely worth looking at and talking about. Come on, there we go. Get that screen up over there and share screen. Here we go. Can you see the presentation now?
Not yet.
Okay. There it is. Do you see it there?
I don't see it yet.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
But maybe let me make sure. Yeah, I don't see it yet, not at this moment.
Okay, now, how about now? Here it
Nope.
comes.
Oh yeah, here we go. Good.
Woohoo! There we go. Thank you for your patience on that. So I'm going to talk to you about the Learning Quest plan. And as Jason mentioned, every state has one. I'm going to skip through these because Jason did a great job on all of that. Every state has a 529 plan, and the one in Kansas is called Learning Quest. That's the name of the plan. There isn't anyone who works for Learning Quest. American Century Investments, who I work for, we are the investment company that manages the program, and we partner with the Kansas State Treasurer's Office, and they administer the program. So the Treasurer's Office really back in the year 2000 created Learning Quest and hired us to manage it, and we've been doing it ever since. So a little over 20 years now. 529s in general came about in about 1996. They started, and they were really created as a way for families to save for higher education, or they called them post-secondary education. So anything after high school. And I think the biggest thing to remember is that can look different for every student. And I have 2 kids, and it looked very different for each one. So college could be a 2-year college. It could be Johnson County Community College, for example, for 2 years, and that's it. It could be a certificate program through there that's even less than 2 years. It can be a combination of that and maybe a 4-year school. It can be a trade school. It might be culinary school. Anything that is an accredited institution in the country is considered what you can use the money in a 529 for. And accredited just means if you can apply for federal financial aid to go to school there, then it's an accredited institution. So that's thousands of different schools across the country. The student can choose any of those schools, and it doesn't matter where they go to school. It doesn't matter where they live. So if you are a grandparent, perhaps thinking about maybe helping out and saving for college for your grandkids, if they live in a different state, it doesn't matter. You would be setting up the account in the Learning Quest program as the Kansas plan and contributing to that. And that student, when they're ready to go to college, wherever they live, wherever they decide to go, as long as it's accredited, it does not matter. So some people think if it's the Kansas plan, they have to go to a Kansas school, and that's not correct. There are some big tax advantages when they created these. One of the first things is there's no minimum to open up an account. That was a decision American Century made several years ago, and a lot of 529 plans have done it because we want these to be affordable for anyone. So there is no minimum to set up an account. There is a maximum. Every plan has one. It's really that $450,000 per beneficiary. Doesn't apply to most of us, but every plan has a maximum, and it's based on 5 years, private school, out of state. What's the most that somebody might need to save and use for college, and that's what that amount is. And it gets adjusted for inflation every year or two as well. These plans are very flexible. They were designed to be that way. So as I said, they can attend any qualified eligible institution. If you can apply for financial aid by filling out that FAFSA, then that's an eligible institution. And a couple of years ago, the IRS expanded 529s so that you can also use the money for K through 12 tuition only at private and religious schools. It is limited to $10,000 a year per student. But even though these were really designed to be college savings plans, they have now been expanded really to even use them for K through 12. So we really just call them education savings plans, 529 education saving plans. And as Jason also mentioned, most clients and people that I work with in the community and in the area and across the state of Kansas, I go all over the state of Kansas, they don't plan on using this 529 or any savings vehicle to pay for the whole thing. That 117,000 or what have you can seem very overwhelming to most of us. And that's not what most people use it for. They use it to help save maybe a third, whatever they can do. Their data shows that if students have no savings put aside for them to go to college, then a lot of times they won't go. So if there is at least some sort of savings that has been started, and whatever you can do as a family to put that money away, that along with the grants, possibly the scholarships, the discounts, etc., that's, that is how most families put their kids through school. And the reality is sometimes they also have to take out a loan. It is the reality, as Jason went over the numbers, 1.6 some trillion dollars. I will tell you personally, I have a daughter who went to KU for 4 years. We did save using the Learning Quest plan, and that did help her. It did not get her through even 2 full years of it, but it did help get her through, along with some scholarships that she got. And then she decided to go on to grad school for 3 more years. So I have a Parent Plus loan, a federal Parent Plus loan. She also has a student loan, and that's how we got the whole 7 years done. So it takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to get them through college. The other thing I would say is there's no limit to the changes in beneficiary. What does that mean? Well, your student is the beneficiary. They're going to benefit from this savings account. So that's how I like to remember it. And if you're the parents or grandparents setting up the account, you are called the account owner. Something that's not on this slide, but that is a real big benefit to 529 plans, is that the account owner maintains control of that account even when the student reaches 18 years old or 21 or 35, whatever. At no time does the account owner have to give that money over to the beneficiary at whatever age. So number one question that I am asked is, what happens if this student that I've started saving for doesn't go to college? What if something else comes along that's a better fit for them, or what have you? I would say, remember, first of all, that college can include trade schools, apprenticeships, lots of different programs. But if you have a situation where a student decides or doesn't go to college at all, and they do something else, they take a different path, one of the options is that you can move the money from that beneficiary to another beneficiary. And if it is an eligible family member, which the IRS defines all the way out to first cousin. So if there's another family member who might use that money, which most likely would be a sibling, but that includes stepbrother, stepsister, foster brother, foster children, aunt, uncle, maybe mom and dad want to use that money and go back to school. But if nobody in the family is going to use that, if you're not going to change the beneficiary on the account, then you can always take the money out as a non-qualified withdrawal and give it to the student, the beneficiary, your child, to use for something else, for example. And we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But again, that flexibility that comes with the 529 plans is that you can change that beneficiary as many times as you need to or want to. A lot of times I see families that have multiple children move the money between those children. Some need more than others. Maybe one goes to private school, another goes to public. Maybe one got a scholarship, one didn't, whatever. So you can move it around. It's not reported to the IRS. It's not taxable. And again, the account owner maintains control of that account forever unless you decide to transfer the ownership over to the child when they're over 18. And then we're going to talk here in just a moment about the investment options. But the other big benefit to 529s are the tax benefits. So the first thing is the tax deferred growth. Now, let me say, first of all, this money that gets put in is after tax money. So it is not like a retirement plan where maybe you do a pre-tax contribution. It's after tax. So if you open up a Learning Quest account or any 529 account, whatever you put in, you've already paid taxes on that money. Anything that it makes or it earns over the life of that account, that's your tax deferred growth. When it comes time to take the money out and to start using it for qualified expenses for college, as long as you're using it for those qualified expenses, anything that you made on that money is tax-free at both the state and federal level. I don't know of any other savings vehicle out there that you can use, where as long as you're using it for the purpose that it was set up for, where you don't owe any taxes on the gains. So that's probably the biggest benefit really with 529s, I think. And what are those qualified withdrawals? Well, that includes their tuition, room and board, as long as they're at least a part-time student. And that includes living off campus, because if your student ends up going to a K-State or a KU or an Arkansas or Missouri, whatever, you'll find that really just the freshmen and maybe sophomores might live on campus at most, but at a lot of colleges, there's not enough room for all the students to live on campus. So that includes off campus as well. So tuition, room and board, as long as they're a part-time student, required fees, computer, laptop. What student is not going to need a computer, a laptop when they go off to college? Their printer, their Wi-Fi access, any equipment that they need to have to be enrolled in that program. So if it is a trade school, for example, any equipment that they have to have is considered a qualified expense. If you have someone going into nursing school and they have to get the lab coat and the goggles and the stethoscope, that's all equipment that's required to be in that program. And those are all qualified expenses. So anything basically that is used for that program is qualified. Also, as a reminder, K through 12 tuition only up to $10,000 a year is also considered a qualified expense. And then, as the slide states, with the passing of the Secure Act, student loan repayments up to $10,000 lifetime is now also a qualified withdrawal. So I know families that are doing different things with that. Maybe the money's been set aside, the student has used it, they have money left over. Maybe they transfer the beneficiary to mom or dad and they use the rest of it to pay off their student loan debt. I have grandparents who set these up. They put the money aside, but they don't necessarily tell the child that there's money sitting out there because they want them to pay some of their own schooling so that they've got some skin in the game. But they tell them, if you get through or you get certain grades or whatever whatever criteria they set, at the end of it, I'll pay off your student loan debt or what have you, up to $10,000. So that's new, and families are using it in different ways. And then also apprenticeship programs. And some of those students get paid while they're in the program. So there are apprenticeship programs where they may make a third of the salary until they're finished with the program, and then they can make more. But that is also considered a qualified expense. So that's the biggest benefit for any 529. And then as a Kansas resident, the state of Kansas also gives you another little perk for the money that goes in to a 529. So if you live in the state of Kansas and you contribute to a 529, any 529 for that matter, you get to take a deduction off your Kansas state taxes of up to $3,000 a year if you're single, $6,000 if you're married filing jointly, and that is per child or per beneficiary per year. So if I had 3 children and I had the means to put away as much as I could deduct, I could put $18,000 in, $6,000 for each child. When I go to file my Kansas state tax return, there's a line item on there that says, did you contribute to a 529? And if so, how much? And I would put $18,000 down, and that would become a deduction for me. So that's another little perk. Every state decides on their own if they're going to do any type of state tax deduction, and so that varies from state to state. Now, if any of you on here with the Johnson County Public Library System happens to live in Missouri, I will tell you that as a Missouri resident, you can also invest in the Learning Quest plan and take your state tax deduction. And in Missouri says it's $8,000 if you're single, $16,000 if you're married, but that's not per beneficiary. That's just for the entire household. So and those are deductions for the money going in. So contributions. Family members who live in the state of Kansas, aunts, uncles, whoever, if they want to contribute to the students' college savings, to their 529, they can take a deduction for whatever they put in. So if my parents gave my child $100 at Christmas and it was put into Learning Quest, they could take a $100 deduction off of their taxes. The estate planning is really more for your higher income families. There is a way for you to use 529s and put away even more than that, and it doesn't count against your gift tax exclusion. So as Jason, being a CPA, he's familiar with that as well. And so if that would apply to you, I would say, you know, talk to your CPA, talk to your tax advisor. But there are families that use this as part of an estate planning tool as well. We encourage regular investing, you know, a monthly type of investing, because that is just a really good way for people to budget and set aside a certain amount of money that they're going to put away every month. And the last thing I'm going to talk to you about briefly is, what would you invest that money in? So just very similar to your retirement accounts that you may have, you choose an investment portfolio. And that's exactly what you do with a 529. There are two different methods you can use with Learning Quest. One is called an age-based track and the other is called static. All of these are invested in mutual funds that consist of stocks, bonds, and cash. American Century Investments, we manage a lot of those. We also use Vanguard for our index funds. So you're going to choose a portfolio that will have a certain amount of stock, bond, and cash in it, just like most likely a retirement type of portfolio. The earlier you start, the younger your child is, the better, because you have a longer time frame to work with. You've got time on your side for the stock market to go up and down or do whatever it does. You know, it does crazy things. The shorter your time frame, you probably want to be more conservative, because you may not have that much time for that stock market volatility. This is an example of the age-based tracks. In an age-based portfolio, you just decide, and you go to our website and see different questions that help you determine, am I an aggressive investor? Am I moderate? Am I conservative? If I say, for example, I'm going to use moderate because it's right in the middle. If I had a 5-year-old child and I thought, you know, I don't think I'm super aggressive, but I'm also not super conservative, I'm going to choose the moderate track. By looking at this slide, you'll see that we would place them in the 60% equity portfolio. And if you were on our website, you would click on that and it would open up a pie chart that would tell you exactly what that's invested in. 50% of it is going to be in stocks. That's what equities are. The other 50% will be in bonds and cash. Why? Because with the stock market's up, usually the bond market may not be up. And if the bond market goes up, stock market goes down. They tend to work opposite directions. So you've got some cushion there. Stock market and cash is less risky than stock. I'm sorry. A bond market and cash is less risky than stocks. So we would put them in the 60%. When they turn 8, we'll move them to the 50%. When they turn 11, we're going to keep them in the 50%. When they turn 14, we're going to dial that back to the 40%. And at 16, 30%. And you see how that happens in each of these different tracks. The idea being, as that student gets closer to college age, where they're going to need to use the money, less of it is exposed to stocks and more of it is exposed to bonds and cash. And by clicking on any of these on the website, you can see what the return has been for the past 1, 3, 5 years. Nobody knows what will happen in the future, but you can look at the past performance. We also have a track that's in the index funds. We use Vanguard again for this. It's just a different type of investing. We have more information out there on our website about that as well. But index tracks are usually, they are set up to mirror a certain index. And then the other option is that static investment. This is really more of a hands-on approach for people who are somewhat familiar with investing and they say, you know what, I'll manage it myself. I feel like I don't want you to choose the portfolio based on the age of my beneficiary. I'm going to choose it. So you'll see this whole range, the most aggressive being 100% in stocks and the most conservative being cash, which is really like a money market. So you can design your own portfolio. You can pick more than one of these and decide. Just remember that it's not going to move unless you move it. Where with the age base, we're automatically moving that for you when your child reaches those certain ages on the left-hand side. The IRS currently limits all of us to only 2 changes per calendar year. That's for all 529s. Legislation has been introduced to increase that to 4 times or make it unlimited. And at some point, I think something will probably pass because the market's a lot more volatile than it used to be. But for now, it's still 2 times per year per child. So that's kind of your investment options. I'll just mention for a second that if you live in the state of Kansas and your income level falls anywhere down here, your adjusted gross income, the state of Kansas still does a matching grant program. So money is set aside every year in the Kansas budget for a certain number of grants. I think it's $1,200 a year. And if you qualify, it really just depends on how many people live in your household and what that adjusted gross income is. But if you would apply and meet any of this, if this criteria fits you, you would go on our website and you could apply for the matching grant. And what the state of Kansas does is for every dollar you put in for your beneficiary, they'll match it dollar for dollar up to $600 per year. So that's just something nice a lot of people don't know about. And that's really, I think, Jason and Karen, that is the bulk of my presentation. So I think we'll open up to questions.
Excellent. Yeah, that was great information. And I know, Karen, typically we also end the recording around this point before we get to questions. I don't know if that's what you were planning to do, but.
Yes, I am. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. And please take a moment to drop a thank you in the chat to Jason and Teresa for taking the time out of their busy schedules to share all this outstanding financial aid information. This now concludes the recorded portion of this program.